PPSA is certainly not just an area that affects specialist banking and finance lawyers. It does affect them dramatically, of course. It's a fundamental rewrite of the law of securities, so it does affect every transaction that involves taking or giving security. But PPSA is a broad-ranging reform and it affects many other areas as well. Well, one is equipment leasing. So many leases, even operating leases, are now treated as security interests and they need to be registered in order to be perfected. A second area is supply of goods. Supply contracts often contain retention of title clauses, and these are now treated as security interests. And again, these are things that need to be registered when they didn't before. Sale and purchase of business is another area that is affected. A first step is doing due diligence on the business being acquired, and PPS searches will be an important part of any due diligence exercise to discover what security interests are there. It'll be necessary to know how to deal with them. How do they get discharged? Sale and purchase agreements themselves don't often include security interests, but they can, particularly if title is being retained until a purchase price is paid. Construction law is an affected area. Construction contracts contain security interests, for example, where one party has the right to take another party's equipment on default to finish the job. And there are cases about a builder's property being left on site and then being taken away by the developer's bank. Energy and resources is an affected area. Mining and oil and gas companies are often parties to joint ventures, and joint venture agreements often contain default remedies that turn out to be security interests and should be registered. Real estate can be affected, mostly not, because mostly real property is outside the scope of the PPSA, but in commercial leasing you find that there is a lease of fit out, and the fit out may include goods as well as fixtures, and the lease of the goods may need to be registered as a PPS lease, which is a security interest. Intellectual property lawyers will be affected. Intellectual property lawyers are used to dealing with registers, of course. Patents and trademarks are on registers, but now they have to deal with two sets of registers. The IP registers that contain the ownership of the particular intellectual property, and the PPS register that contains details of security interests affecting it. And insolvency practitioners will be heavily affected. All the rules around security interests are different. Unperfected security interests, for instance, won't usually survive an insolvency. So insolvency practitioners have a great deal of new law to come to grips with. So for lawyers in areas affected by the PPSA, nothing will beat a full understanding of the law. The LexisNexis Practical Guidance Personal Property Securities module will help. It's got a lot of practical tips. For instance, it sets out some of the key things that practitioners should watch for that are likely to be hotspots, that are likely to create security interests. For example, watch out for anything where I give you the right to take my property away from me if payment's not made or an obligation's not performed. That may be a security interest. For example, watch out for sale contracts containing retention of title or remalpa clauses. Those are security interests and need to be registered. Watch out for equipment leases. They may be PPS leases, which are a kind of deemed security interest. Watch out for anything that puts my property in your hands so that it looks to the rest of the world like you own it and are a person of substance, but where I want the right to take it back again when things aren't so good. That might be a consignment or a PPS lease. Watch out for transfers of amounts owing or assignments of contracts. They might be what's called transfers of accounts or chattel paper, which are security interests and need to be registered. So the LexisNexis Practical Guidance Personal Property Securities module gives some tips on how to recognise these transactions, but then it goes on to provide practical advice on how to complete the registration, going step by step through everything that needs to be done to get the registration done, and giving some examples of specific transactions and the details that would be completed for them.
Discover more practical content on the PPSA and PPSR within our Practical Guidance Personal Property Securities module. If you haven't already, register for a free trial on our website today.